It was Christmas Eve in Charleston, and the air was heavy with the scent of salt water and a strained sense of cheer. I'd just staggered out of the ER after a 16-hour double shift. A deep ache settled into my bones that felt more profound than simple exhaustion. My phone vibrated against my hip, a text from my 16-year-old daughter, Chloe. She was supposed to be at her grandmother's house, the centerpiece of our family's holiday, surrounded by twinkling lights and the sounds of celebration. The text contained only 2 words: "I'm home." A chill snaked up my spine, colder than the winter air. I muttered a clipped, vague excuse to my mother-in-law on the phone and pointed my car toward our small house, my heart hammering a frantic, desperate rhythm against my ribs. I found Chloe curled into a tight ball on our living room sofa. Her festive party dress was a crumpled mess beneath her. Her eyes were puffy and red, and in the dim light, she looked impossibly small. When I knelt on the floor beside her, she didn't even look at me. "Honey, what is it? What happened?" I whispered, my hand stroking her hair. Her voice was just a fragile wisp of sound. "They told me the table was full." Before we get into the rest of this story, do me a quick favor and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. 6 words. That was all it took for my world to fracture. My daughter, my bright, kind girl, had been turned away. No chair, no plate, no welcome. On Christmas Eve, my own family had told my child there was no room for her. I held my daughter as she trembled, trying to assemble the story from the shattered pieces of her sobs. It came out in fragments, each one a sharp shard of a night that was meant to be magical. For weeks, Chloe had been vibrating with excitement for this dinner. At 16, she was finally on the cusp of feeling like a real part of the adult world. She had her new driver's license, a dress she'd picked out herself, and a feeling of belonging she thought was an ironclad guarantee of blood. The evening had begun with so much promise. She'd spent the entire afternoon in our kitchen, a faint dusting of flour on her nose as she meticulously followed my great-grandmother's recipe for Benny wafers. It was a cherished family tradition, one I'd passed down to her years ago. She arranged the delicate, crispy sesame cookies herself in a festive green tin, each one a perfect, lacy disc of toasted sweetness. It was so much more than just a dessert. It was her offering, a symbol that she was no longer a child relegated to the card table in the den. She was one of them now, bringing something to share. She told me about the drive over to her grandmother Margaret's house. She'd had the radio on, singing along to Christmas carols, feeling that pure teenage thrill of independence on a night that sparkled with possibility. Charleston's historic downtown was draped in elegant white lights, and the grand old houses along the Battery looked like something from a postcard. She pulled up to Margaret's home, the very one my salary kept from foreclosure, and saw it blazing with light and warmth. Cars lined the narrow street. Through the massive bay window, she could see the dance of the fireplace flames and the silhouettes of people laughing, their wine glasses raised in a toast. Taking a steadying breath, she walked up the old brick pathway, the green tin held carefully in her hands. The rich scent of roasted lamb and spiced wine drifted out into the humid South Carolina night. She could hear her Uncle Rob's signature booming laugh before she even reached the door. This was her family. This was where she was meant to be. The door was opened by Margaret herself. "My mother," Chloe said, her grandmother's practiced smile, the one she reserved for important guests, faltered the moment she saw her. It was instantly replaced by a tight, annoyed expression, as if a tiresome interruption had just appeared on her polished doorstep. "Chloe," she'd said, her voice completely flat. She didn't open the door any wider. She didn't offer a hug or a Merry Christmas. She just stood there, a physical barrier between my daughter and the warmth and laughter inside. "Hi, Grandma." "Merry Christmas," Chloe had said, holding up the tin. "I brought Benny wafers." Margaret's eyes darted down to the tin and then back up to Chloe's face, her expression unmoved. "Oh, well, that's nice. The thing is, we're completely maxed out this year. There's really no more room." Chloe told me she just stood there on the stoop, the cold seeping through her thin shoes, utterly confused. Maxed out? What did that even mean? It was a house, not a restaurant with a strict fire code. It was supposed to be family. Then her Uncle Rob appeared behind Margaret, a glass of bourbon in his hand. He peeked over his mother's shoulder and gave Chloe a lazy, dismissive grin. "Hey, kiddo, bad timing. It's a full house tonight." He let out a low chuckle, a careless, dismissive sound that made Chloe's cheeks burn with shame. "Try next time. Try next time." As if Christmas was a game of chance, as if her presence was a prize she had to win through sheer luck. No one else came to the door. No one called out a greeting. No one asked her to come inside, not even for a minute to say hello. The warmth from the house felt like a physical wall she couldn't break through. The sounds of a party, of a family celebrating together, became a dull, mocking roar in her ears. She remembered looking past her grandmother's rigid shoulder and seeing cousins she'd played with her whole life, aunts and uncles, all moving and chatting as if nothing was wrong. As if she wasn't standing on the outside, being actively turned away. She didn't know what to say. The rejection was so blunt, so utterly unexpected, that words simply evaporated. She just nodded, the movement feeling stiff and foreign. She mumbled something like, "Okay, Merry Christmas," and turned around. She walked back down that brick path, her new patent leather shoes feeling deafeningly loud in the sudden, ringing silence. She felt dozens of eyes on her back, even though she knew there were none. The humiliation was a physical weight pressing down on her, making it hard to breathe. She got back into her car, her hands shaking so badly she fumbled with the key in the ignition. She placed the green tin of cookies on the passenger seat beside her. The sweet, nutty smell filled the car, and it suddenly felt cloying and sickening. She drove home through the same beautifully decorated streets, but now the cheerful twinkling lights seemed to be jeering at her. Each house glowing with family and joy was a stark reminder of the door that had just been closed in her face. She cried the entire way, the tears blurring the beautiful, cruel lights of the city. Back in our living room, I stared at the green tin now sitting on our coffee table. I lifted the lid. The Benny wafers were perfect. They were a testament to her care, her love, her hope. And they had been refused. My mother and my brother hadn't just turned away my daughter. They had rejected the very best part of her. They had looked at her hopeful, loving heart and informed her there was no room for it. I tucked a soft blanket around Chloe on the sofa, her breathing finally evening out into the steady rhythm of sleep. I stroked her hair, my mind a silent, raging storm. For years, I had accepted their casual dismissiveness toward me. I had swallowed the insults, paid the endless bills, and played the peacemaker. I had told myself it was just what you do for family. But this was different. This wasn't about me anymore. They had taken their careless cruelty and aimed it directly at the one person in this world I would not allow them to break. They had hurt my child, and in doing so, they had finally shown me that they weren't my family at all. They were just people I was related to, people whose comfortable lives I had been underwriting. A quiet, ice-cold certainty settled deep in my chest. The payments were about to stop. Chloe slept, but rest was impossible for me. I sat at our small kitchen table, the untouched tin of cookies in front of me like an indictment. The house was silent except for the low, constant hum of the refrigerator. Outside, a neighbor's festive lights blinked on and off, casting cheerful rhythmic shadows across my floor. The hypocrisy of it all was suffocating. Charleston, the city that prided itself on its legendary Southern hospitality, was home to the coldest people I knew. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 38 years old and I am an ER nurse. I spend my days and often my nights putting people back together. I fix what's broken, I stop the bleeding, and I try to create order out of utter chaos. It's a skill I apparently brought home with me, because for the last 15 years, that's all I've been to my own family. A fixer, the quiet, reliable woman they called not for celebrations, but only for catastrophes. The words Chloe had whispered before she finally drifted off to sleep echoed in my head. They made me feel like baggage. Baggage, something you carry out of a sense of obligation, something heavy and always in the way. And I realized with a sickening, gut-wrenching clarity, that's precisely how they'd been treating me for years. My wallet, on the other hand, was always a welcome guest. My bank account always had a seat at the head of the table. My mind began to drift backward, pulling up memory after memory of the frantic phone calls, the desperate requests, the endless river of financial emergencies. It was a pattern so deeply ingrained in our dynamic that I had long ago stopped seeing it for what it was: exploitation. I remembered the call about the historic Iron Gate. It was about 3 years ago. Margaret had called me in a full-blown panic, her voice laced with that specific brand of manufactured hysteria she was so good at. A hurricane had brushed the coast, and a single heavy oak branch had fallen, taking out a section of the ornate wrought iron gate that surrounded her property. "The Homeowners Association is going to fine me into oblivion, Eleanor," she'd cried. "You know I can't afford a repair like this. I don't know what I'll do." She made it sound like she was facing homelessness over a piece of decorative metal. I was saving for a down payment on a newer, safer car for Chloe and me. But the guilt, as always, worked its dark magic. Family helps family, I told myself as I transferred her $15,000 from my savings. I remember seeing the charge for the artisan metalworker come through. A week later, I saw a photo on a cousin's social media feed of a lavish garden party at Margaret's house. The newly repaired gate was in the background, gleaming in the afternoon sun. I wasn't invited. When I asked her about it, she'd waved it off with an airy, "Oh, it was just a small thing. You were probably working anyway." Then there was Rob's truck. My brother Rob, who possessed the financial acumen of a teenager with a stolen credit card. He called me one night, his voice a low, urgent whisper. His work truck, he said, had completely given up the ghost. The engine was shot. He needed it for his so-called contracting business, he claimed. Without it, he couldn't feed his family. He laid the responsibility for his livelihood squarely at my feet. "I know it's a lot to ask, Elle, but you're the only one who can help me out of this bind." The bill was just shy of $12,000. I co-signed the loan, and when he inevitably started missing the payments, I made them myself to protect my own credit score. 2 months later, I saw him driving down the street, towing a brand new jet ski behind that same essential work truck. When I confronted him, he just laughed it off. "You gotta live a little, sis. Don't be so uptight all the time." But the biggest, heaviest chain around my neck was the house itself. The very house Chloe had just been turned away from. It had been in our family for generations. And 5 years ago, after a string of Rob's spectacularly failed business ventures and my mother's reckless spending, The bank was threatening foreclosure. The emotional blackmail that followed was masterful. Margaret had wept, talking about how she couldn't bear to lose the home my late father had loved, the place where we grew up. Rob accused me of not caring about our family's legacy. They couldn't secure a new loan on their own. Their credit was in ruins. So I did it. I put my name on the new mortgage, $250,000 of debt that wasn't even mine. I paid a significant portion of it every single month, a line item in my budget right next to groceries and my own rent. I was paying for a home I was not welcome in. All the pieces were clicking into place, forming a mosaic of profound and deliberate disrespect. I was the family ATM, the emergency credit line. I was useful for my income, my stability, my unending willingness to clean up their messes. I was the one they called when a car was about to be repossessed, when a credit card was declined at a fancy restaurant, when the utility company sent a final notice. But when it came time to share joy, when the table was set for a celebration, I was an afterthought. And tonight, my daughter had learned she was less than an afterthought. She was a problem to be dealt with by closing a door. They made me feel like baggage. Chloe's words weren't just the hurt feelings of a teenage girl. They were the absolute, unvarnished truth of our situation. We were baggage, heavy, inconvenient, and only picked up when they needed something from inside. Something inside me didn't just break. It atomized. The part of me that made excuses for them, the part that clung to the flimsy childish hope of one day earning their love and respect, was gone. It was replaced by a cold, hard, diamond-like clarity. You cannot fix people who are determined to remain broken. You cannot earn respect from those who are fundamentally incapable of giving it. All you can do is stop letting them hurt you, and you can, under no circumstances, allow them to hurt your child. I stood up from the kitchen table. The blinking lights outside no longer bothered me. They were just lights. They had no power, and neither, I realized with a jolt, did my family. Not anymore. Their power came from me, from my compliance and my checkbook, and I was about to turn it off. The digital clock on the oven glowed, 4:03 a.m. The pre-dawn hours are a time of reckoning in a hospital. It's when fevers often break, when the fight is won or lost. And in the silent stillness of my own home, it felt like a battle was finally turning. The grief that had hollowed me out for hours was now crystallizing into something else entirely. Focus. I walked over to the small desk I kept in a corner of the living room and flipped open my laptop. The screen cast a sterile blue light across my face. For years, I had deliberately avoided looking too closely at the numbers. I knew I was giving them money, of course. But I'd kept the grand total intentionally vague in my mind. To quantify it felt like admitting the true scale of the problem, and I hadn't been ready for that. Now I was. I opened my online banking portal and started scrolling back. Month after month, year after year. The names were always the same: Margaret Vance, Robert Vance. The payment memos were a sad, documented history of their manufactured crises. Car trouble, leaky roof, dental bill, help with taxes. Each one was a small, sharp paper cut to my own financial health. I opened a spreadsheet and began the painstaking work of logging every single transfer, every bill paid on their behalf. I worked backward, from last week's emergency grocery money for Rob to the thousands I'd sent years before. With each line item I entered, the hot, blinding rage I felt began to cool into a cold, precise instrument. This wasn't about emotion anymore. This was about data. This was about the truth. I pulled up old credit card statements, finding the charges for their utility bills I'd put on my card to stop a shutoff. I found the loan documents I had foolishly co-signed, the mortgage statements I paid without fail each month. The numbers climbed higher and higher. 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. It was staggering. It was the college fund Chloe deserved. It was the family vacations we never took. It was the financial security I had sacrificed on the altar of a family that wouldn't save my daughter a seat at their table. The final tally of direct cash, not even including the loans I was still legally on the hook for, was just over $200,000. I typed the number at the bottom of the spreadsheet and stared at it. It looked like a mistake. It was a mistake. Mine. Just then, my phone, lying on the desk beside me, buzzed. The screen lit up with a text message. It was from Margaret. My heart seized for a second, a reflexive jolt of anxiety. Did she know Chloe had told me? Was this an apology? I opened the message. It read, "Property taxes are up again this year. Can you help?" It was 4:27 a.m. on Christmas morning. Not a word about her granddaughter, not a single hint of remorse, just a hand held out, palm up, ready to receive. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. It was the final piece of evidence I needed, a gift-wrapped confirmation of her complete and utter self-absorption. I didn't feel a surge of anger. I felt nothing at all. A profound, empty calm washed over me. This was who she was. This was who they were. I took a screenshot of the text message and saved it to my desktop. It was no longer a request. It was evidence. A soft footstep on the hardwood floor made me look up. It was Sarah, Chloe's stepmom. She and my ex-husband had a far healthier relationship than I ever did with my own family. She'd come over late last night after I called her, her face a mask of quiet fury on Chloe's behalf. She must have woken up and seen the light from the living room. She stood there in her robe, holding 2 mugs of coffee. She set one down beside me, her eyes taking in the spreadsheets, the bank statements, the grim look on my face. She didn't need to ask what I was doing. "I heard her crying in her sleep," Sarah said softly. Her voice filled with a maternal warmth that my own mother had never once possessed. "She's such a good kid, Ellie. She didn't deserve that." I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Sarah looked at the screen, at the endless columns of figures. She sighed, a sad, knowing sound. "They're never going to change, you know," she said. It wasn't a criticism, but a gentle statement of fact. "They will keep taking as long as you keep giving. They will never learn to stand on their own 2 feet until you stop saving them every time they fall." Her words landed like a physician's diagnosis. Clean, clear, and undeniably true. I had been an enabler, not a helper. My constant rescues were just prolonging their dysfunction and poisoning my own life in the process. I looked at her, the woman who showed my daughter more kindness than her own blood relatives, and I felt a surge of gratitude. She had given me the one thing I needed and could never seem to give myself: permission to stop. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. Then I turned back to the computer, my movements now filled with a new and unshakable purpose. I minimized the spreadsheet and opened a new browser window. Then another, and another. The electric company, the insurance provider, the bank that held the mortgage. The plan was forming in my mind, clean and efficient. It wouldn't involve shouting or tears or dramatic confrontations. It would be quiet. It would be methodical. It would be freedom, disguised as paperwork. Christmas morning dawned gray and damp, the festive cheer of the neighborhood feeling like it belonged to another world entirely. While other families were gathered around their trees, I was sitting at my desk, methodically preparing to dismantle mine. There was no joy in it, but there was a profound sense of rightness, of a deep structural wrong finally being corrected. I started with the easy things first, the low-hanging fruit of my financial entanglement. I logged into my online banking portal, navigated to the bill pay section, and found the recurring monthly payment to the Charleston Power Water Company for Margaret's address. For years, that payment had gone out on the 15th of every month without a second thought. I clicked on the payment, and a simple menu appeared: edit, skip, cancel. My cursor hovered over the third option for a long moment. It felt so small, so deceptively simple for such a monumental act. I clicked cancel. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to delete this scheduled payment? I clicked yes. And just like that, a wire was cut. One by one, I severed the ties. The homeowner's insurance premium that I paid biannually, the pest control service, the high-speed internet. Each click was a small act of liberation. These weren't huge amounts individually, but together they formed a comprehensive safety net of my own making, a net that had allowed them to live carelessly while I lived cautiously. The net was now gone. Then came the hard part, the mortgage. This couldn't be solved with a simple click. It required a phone call. I looked up the lender's holiday hours. A 24/7 customer service line was open. I took a deep breath and dialed, the automated menu music sounding jarringly upbeat. When a human voice finally came on the line, I was calm and direct. My name is Eleanor Vance, I said. I am a cosigner on mortgage number 882F-14. I am calling to inform you that I will no longer be making voluntary payments on this loan. The primary borrower is Margaret Vance. All future correspondence and bills should be directed solely to her. The agent on the other end was confused. Ma'am, as a cosigner, you are still legally responsible for this debt. I am fully aware of my legal obligations, I said, my voice as steady as a heartbeat monitor. I am also aware that the primary borrower is responsible for making the payments. From this point forward, she will have the opportunity to do so. If she defaults, I will deal with the legal and financial consequences at that time. But my voluntary contributions are ending as of today. After I hung up, the room felt different. The biggest chain had been broken. The responsibility was now where it belonged, on them. Now for the final crucial step, the notification. They couldn't be allowed to believe this was an oversight or a mistake. It had to be a clear, unambiguous statement of cause and effect. I opened a new email. In the to field, I typed Margaret's address, then Rob's. I thought for a moment, then added the addresses of my aunts, uncles, and older cousins, the ones who had likely been standing in that warm living room last night, watching through the window as my daughter was turned away in the cold. They were complicit in their silence. They deserved to know why the family bank was officially closing. The subject line was simple: an update regarding financial matters. Then I began to write. The words came easily, stripped of all emotion and focused only on fact. Margaret and Rob, effective immediately. I will be ending all forms of financial support to you and your households. This includes, but is not limited to, all direct monetary transfers, bill payments, and contributions toward the mortgage. This decision is final and non-negotiable. For years, I have provided this support under the assumption that we were a family, bound by mutual love and respect. But the treatment of my daughter Chloe on Christmas Eve has made it painfully clear that this assumption was wrong. She was dismissed and humiliated, and in your cruelty toward her, you have shown me the true nature of our relationship. There is no room for negotiation on this. From this day forward, there will be no more funds, no more favors, and no more contact until genuine respect exists. An insult to my daughter is an insult to me. As I was about to attach the damning spreadsheet, Sarah came to stand behind me, reading the words over my shoulder. She nodded slowly. Good, it's clear. Then she held out her phone. Wait, there's one more thing you need to include. She pressed play on a voice recording. It was Margaret's voice, sharp and annoyed. Sarah must have called her after she left my house last night, demanding an explanation. Honestly, Sarah, you're being as dramatic as she is, Margaret's recorded voice said with a sigh. She's 16. She needs to learn she isn't the center of the universe. It's not a big deal. She'll learn her place. Rob's laugh could be heard in the background, followed by a mumbled, "Toughen her up a bit." Hearing their words, spoken so callously when they thought no one was listening, solidified every last ounce of my resolve. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was their philosophy. My daughter had a place, and it was somewhere outside their door. I looked at Sarah, and she simply nodded, transferring the audio file to my laptop. I attached the spreadsheet, the one with the final damning figure of over $200,000 highlighted in red. Then I attached the audio file, renaming it Their Words, MP3. My finger hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. This was the moment the quiet, accommodating Eleanor ceased to exist. I wasn't just cutting them off. I was holding up an irrefutable mirror to their behavior, backed by receipts and their own recorded voices. I clicked send. The email vanished from my screen. A profound silence filled the room. The sun was fully up now, streaming through the windows. It was Christmas Day, and I had just given myself the only gift I truly wanted: freedom. Christmas Day was unnervingly quiet. After I sent the email, a strange peace settled over our little house. It was the calm in the eye of a hurricane I had just unleashed. Chloe, Sarah, and I tried to salvage the day. We opened the few gifts we'd bought for each other, sipped hot chocolate, and watched an old, comforting holiday movie. But my phone sat on the kitchen counter, a silent black rectangle holding the potential for an explosion. Every time a car drove past, every time the old house creaked, I braced myself. I knew it was coming. The first call came at 2:17 p.m. Caller ID, Margaret. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again and again. On the fourth try, I picked it up and pressed the speaker button. Sarah gave me a supportive nod from across the room. Eleanor? Margaret's voice was thin and reedy, a tone I'd never heard from her before. It wasn't angry, not yet. It was bewildered. I just got your email. This has to be some kind of horrible mistake. Your spreadsheet, this recording. What is this? It's exactly what it looks like, I said, my voice as calm and steady as a surgeon's hand. It's a statement of fact, and a statement of intent. A statement? You're cutting us off? Over a little misunderstanding with Chloe? The disbelief in her voice was staggering. She still saw her granddaughter's deep humiliation as a trivial social blunder. There was no misunderstanding, I replied. You were clear. Rob was clear. There was no room for her, so I am making it clear now. There is no more room for you in my finances. That's when the panic broke through. Eleanor, the mortgage payment is due on the 1st. The automatic payment you set up, that's how it gets paid. The bank will send us a notice. We'll lose the house. Her voice climbed with each word, tipping into the familiar hysteria she usually reserved for manipulating me. But for the first time, the old guilt just wasn't there. I looked out the window at the gray afternoon sky. Then maybe you'll finally understand how it feels to be left out in the cold, I said, the words falling like chips of ice. There was a choked sound on the other end of the line, a gasp of pure indignation. How dare you? After everything we have done for you, I cut her off, my voice sharp. Everything you have done. Don't you dare. You have done nothing but take. The taking is over. I hung up before she could respond. The silence that followed was heavy. Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing," she whispered. 10 minutes later, the assault from Rob began. He didn't bother with a conversation. He went straight to voicemail, his rage too potent to be contained in a dialogue. We listened to the messages together, my phone on the table between us. The first one was just sputtering anger. "What the hell is your problem, Ellie? You've lost your mind. You think you can just turn off the money? Mom is a wreck. You call her back and you fix this. Now." The second voicemail, left 5 minutes later, was more sinister. His voice was lower, spitting with venom. "You want to play hardball? Fine, we'll play. You think you're so perfect, working at that hospital. You're unstable, Eleanor. You're clearly having some kind of mental breakdown. I'll call your boss. I'll tell them you're erratic, that you're a danger to your patients. You'll lose your job, you hear me? You'll lose everything." Sarah's eyes widened, but I felt a strange sense of calm. He was predictable. When guilt didn't work, threats were his next move. This was a cornered animal lashing out. I didn't delete the message. Instead, I carefully saved the audio file, labeled it robthreat_1225, and emailed it to my personal account with the subject line evidence. I did the same with the third and fourth voicemails, each one more unhinged than the last. He was handing me a rope, and I was simply collecting it. Soon after, the texts from the extended family started. The cousins and aunts I had included on the email were chiming in, their words a chorus of willful ignorance and misplaced blame. From my Aunt Patty, "Eleanor, your mother is beside herself. Whatever this is, you need to handle it privately. Doing this on Christmas is just cruel." From my cousin Steve, "Not cool, Ellie. I don't know what's going on, but Rob said you sent some crazy stuff. We're all worried about you." They had seen the spreadsheet. They had received the audio file of their own voices, and still they chose to believe the simplest story, that I, the quiet, dependable one, had suddenly gone insane. It was easier than confronting the ugly truth that the family's matriarch and her favored son were cruel and parasitic. I read each message and then deleted it without a response. My silence was a wall they could not breach. They had wanted my silence and compliance for years. When they rejected my daughter, they expected her to go home and cry quietly, to absorb the hurt without making a scene. When I sent the email, they expected my threats to be a bluff, a dramatic outburst that would be followed by a tearful apology and a restoration of the status quo. They wanted to control the narrative, to keep the ugliness private. But I hadn't just exposed the truth. I had documented it. They wanted silence. Instead, they got a reckoning. The days between Christmas and New Year's were filled with a tense, vibrating silence. The angry calls and texts ceased, and I knew why. They were regrouping. They were circling the wagons and crafting a new narrative, one in which they were the victims of my sudden, inexplicable instability. In a small, gossip-fueled city like Charleston, a story like that could take root quickly and choke out the truth. They were counting on the bonds of family and the weight of tradition to shield them. They assumed that, having made my point, I would now retreat and allow them to manage the fallout. Their first public move came on New Year's Eve. An email landed in my inbox from my Aunt Patty. It was addressed to the entire extended family mailing list. Reading it, I could almost hear her syrupy, sanctimonious voice. "Dearest family," it began. "As we prepare to welcome a new year, let us all take a moment to reflect on what truly matters. Life is too short for bitterness and division. It is my deepest hope that we can leave any recent unpleasantness in the past and move forward in a spirit of forgiveness and love. Family is everything, after all. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression. Without mentioning a single detail, it painted me as the source of bitterness and division, and them as the benevolent party, ready to forgive my transgressions. It was an attempt to publicly smooth things over, to sweep the dirt under the rug so the family could present a united front. It was their invitation for me to quietly accept my role as the difficult one and let the matter drop. I stared at the email, then at the audio file still sitting on my desktop. Their words, MP3. Forgiveness? Love? They weren't interested in any of that. They were interested in absolution without apology. They wanted to erase what they had done. I would not let them. I opened a reply. I selected Reply All. I saw all their names populating the address bar. The aunts, the uncles, the cousins, all the silent witnesses. In the body of the email, I typed nothing. Not a word of explanation. Not a single sentence of anger. I simply clicked the attachment button and selected the audio file, theirwords.mp3. I hit send. The effect was instantaneous. My inbox, which had been quiet for days, began to light up like a switchboard. This time, the messages weren't worried or confused. They were frantic and defensive. From Rob, that is taken out of context. This is a violation of our privacy. You are twisting our words to make us look bad. From Margaret, her sentences a jumbled mess of typos. This is slander, Eleanor. I never said that you are trying to destroy this family. You are a hateful girl. From an uncle. Okay, it was a joke in poor taste. We get it. You're angry. But airing this out is just making things worse for everyone. You need to stop. Their reactions told me everything. Not a single person wrote, "I'm so sorry to hear that." That's a terrible thing to say. Their immediate impulse was to deny the evidence, attack the messenger, and protect the status quo. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry they got caught. I read a few of them, then closed my laptop. I refused to engage. The evidence spoke for itself, and so did their response to it. Arguing would be pointless. It would just pull me down into the mud with them. Later that day, Sarah, who had seen the email exchange, shook her head. "They're never going to admit it," she said. "They're just going to try to shout you down until you get tired." She picked up her phone. "They want to control the story. So let's give people a different story to read." Before I could ask what she meant, she was typing. A few minutes later, she showed me her phone. She had written a post on her Facebook page, visible to the wide circle of friends and community members we shared in Charleston. The post was elegant and simple. It didn't name names. It didn't have to. It was a picture of Chloe and me, smiling, taken earlier that day. The caption read, "Thinking a lot lately about what family and hospitality really mean. It's not about having the biggest table. It's about making sure everyone has a seat. It's about building people up, not turning them away. If you reject a child at your door, don't be shocked when she and her mother decide to build their own home." So incredibly proud of the grace and strength shown by my favorite people, Eleanor and Chloe Vance. It was quiet, it was dignified, and it was devastatingly effective. It didn't spread like a wildfire, but like a slow, steady tide. The narrative they had tried so hard to control, that I was unhinged and vindictive, was suddenly countered by a public testament to our grace. We started receiving quiet messages of support. A note from a fellow nurse, a text from a parent at Chloe's school, a like on the post from a distant cousin who had remained silent on the email chain. We had given them the truth in private, and they had rejected it, so we allowed a more elegant version of that truth to exist in public. We didn't have to fight their story. We just had to tell our own, better one. 6 months passed. The furious storm of that Christmas faded into a quiet, empty sky. Spring bloomed across Charleston, draping the city in jasmine and new beginnings. Our home was an oasis of calm. The threatening voicemails and accusatory emails had trickled to a stop, replaced by a profound and welcome silence. Chloe was thriving. The shadow that had fallen over her that winter had receded, and she was pouring her energy into her schoolwork, and for the first time, her poetry. We were healing. The rebuilding wasn't just emotional, it was professional. My work at the crisis center had become my sanctuary and my mission. All the energy I had once spent managing my family's self-made disasters, I now poured into my job. My focus was sharp, my purpose clear. It did not go unnoticed. The culmination of that work came in June at our agency's annual community gala. It was a warm evening, and the event was held in a restored riverside warehouse with fairy lights strung between old wooden beams. I was more than an attendee this year. I was on the program. Sarah and Chloe were there, my two pillars of support. Chloe looked beautiful and confident in a simple blue dress, her eyes shining with pride. As I stood at the podium, looking out at the faces of my colleagues, donors, and community leaders, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't known was possible. I spoke about the mission of our agency, providing a lifeline to those in crisis, and then I transitioned to a new project, one I had built from the ground up, one born from the ashes of that Christmas Eve. Often the deepest crises are the ones no one sees, I said, my voice clear and steady. They happen not in dark alleys, but in brightly lit dining rooms. They are the crises of belonging. For a young person, the feeling of being pushed aside by the very people who are supposed to love you unconditionally can leave a scar that lasts a lifetime. It is a quiet, invisible kind of trauma. I paused, then continued. That is why, tonight, we are officially launching a new initiative. It is called the Miss Clara Fund, named after my grandmother, a woman who believed every table should have an extra chair, just in case. I outlined the fund's purpose: to provide mentorship opportunities, small educational scholarships, and emergency grants for teenagers and young adults in our community who had been ostracized or emotionally neglected by their families. It was a way to turn pain into power, to build a safety net for kids who had theirs torn away. When I finished, the applause was overwhelming. Later, as I stood with my team, my boss raised her glass. "A toast," she said, her voice warm, "to Eleanor Vance, the woman who stopped apologizing for her own strength." My colleagues clinked their glasses against mine, their smiles genuine. In their eyes, I wasn't a victim or a woman scorned. I was a leader, I was a builder. Amid this new life, the ghosts of the old one still made their faint appeals. Throughout the evening, my phone would buzz with a text from Margaret. I'd glance at the screen and see the previews. "Eleanor, please answer." Or, "I just want to talk." I felt nothing. No anger, no pity. It was like reading a message meant for someone else, someone I used to be. I would simply put the phone back in my purse, unanswered. The most jarring message came a week after the gala. An email from Rob appeared in my inbox. The subject line was just 2 words: "I'm sorry." For a second, I was frozen. This was the one thing I never expected. My finger hovered over the message, my curiosity warring with my hard-won peace. The preview text showed the first few words: "I'm sorry. I lost everything. My business failed. Lori left me." I stopped reading. I realized it didn't matter. His apology, if that's what it was born of his own ruin, not of remorse for what he had done to Chloe. He wasn't sorry for the pain he'd caused. He was sorry for the consequences he was now facing. His world had collapsed not because of a single email I sent, but because it was a house of cards built on a foundation of my money and his irresponsibility. I had simply stopped holding it up. Without opening it, without reading another word, I selected the email. My cursor moved to the trash can icon. I clicked it. Then I went to my trash folder and clicked empty trash. It was gone, its contents unknown and irrelevant. He hadn't lost everything because of me. He had lost everything because of himself. My part in his life, and my responsibility for his failures, was over. Another year turned, and with it, the seasons of our new life settled into a comfortable rhythm. It was a life defined not by what we had lost, but by what we were building. The first crisp days of autumn arrived, and I drove up to visit Chloe at college. Walking across the sun-dappled campus, with its old brick buildings and students hurrying to class, I felt a sense of peace so profound it was almost startling. This was what I had been working for. This was the future I had secured for her. Chloe was flourishing. She was no longer the wounded girl I had held on the sofa. She was a confident, articulate young woman. Her dorm room was a chaotic, happy mess of books, sketches, and photos of her friends. She was studying literature, and her passion for it was palpable. The highlight of my visit was holding a copy of the campus literary journal. There, on page 17, was a poem titled "The Empty Chair" by Chloe Vance. I read the words, and tears welled in my eyes. It wasn't a poem of anger or bitterness. It was about learning that an empty chair isn't a void, but an opportunity, a space you can choose to fill with something better. It was about building your own table instead of waiting for an invitation to someone else's. She had taken the ugliest moment of her young life and transformed it into art. She had found her voice, and it was powerful and clear. My own life had transformed in parallel. I'd been promoted to program director at the agency. My work was no longer confined to one center. I was now overseeing crisis outreach programs for the entire city. My days were long and challenging, filled with logistics, grant writing, and managing a large team, but it was deeply meaningful work. I saw the impact of the Miss Clara Fund firsthand, the teenager who used a grant to buy a laptop for college after being kicked out of his home, the young woman who was paired with a mentor who helped her find a safe apartment. I was no longer just fixing my own family's problems. I was helping to build a stronger, more compassionate community. The news about Margaret and Rob's old house came to me secondhand. An old neighbor, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, mentioned it in passing at the grocery store. "Did you hear your old family place finally sold?" she asked. "Took forever. Bank auction, I think. Shame what happened there." Later that day, I looked it up online. There it was, the grand old house, now with a red "Sold" banner slashed across the main picture. The description was sterile, all about square footage and historical features, with no mention of the life or the toxicity it once held. I felt a surprising lack of emotion. There was no triumphant surge of victory, no lingering sadness. It was like looking at a photo of a stranger's house. It was just a building, and it no longer had any power over me. Their pride, which had been as formidable and carefully maintained as that house, had evaporated along with their assets. I heard whispers that Margaret was living in a small rental apartment an hour outside the city, and Rob had moved away entirely after his business and marriage collapsed. Their social standing in Charleston, which they had prized above all else, was gone. They were no longer the hosts of lavish parties. They were a cautionary tale whispered about over brunch. Their calls and texts had long since stopped. Before they did, I had taken the final step of blocking their numbers. It wasn't an act of anger, but of simple housekeeping, like clearing out old files that were no longer needed. They were no longer a part of my life, and I needed to ensure they couldn't force their way back in. Looking at the picture of that sold house, the finality of it all settled in. They had built a life of comfort and status, but none of it was truly theirs. It was a life constructed with my money, my credit, my labor, and my silence. When I withdrew those things, their world proved to have no foundation of its own. It simply crumbled. They hadn't just lost a house. They had lost everything they had built on my back. 2 years to the day after Chloe came home in tears. It was Christmas Eve again. The air outside was cold for Charleston, and a soft mist clung to the ancient oak trees. But inside my house it was glowing. There were no grand chandeliers or gleaming silver trays. We had a slightly lopsided tree that Chloe and I had decorated, covered in a mismatched collection of ornaments, each with its own story. The scent of cinnamon and ginger from Sarah's baking filled the small space, and a quiet jazz station played from a speaker in the corner. Our gathering was small, intimate, and chosen. It was just me, Chloe, Sarah, and 2 of my closest friends from the hospital. There was no tension, no performing, no walking on eggshells. The laughter was easy and genuine. We weren't bound by obligation or a shared surname. We were bound by genuine affection and mutual respect. This was my family now. After our simple dinner, we sat in the living room, mugs of tea warming our hands. Chloe, who had come home from college for the holidays, pulled out a small bound journal. "I wrote something I'd like to share," she said, her voice soft but sure. We all turned to her. The Lila who read her poem that night was a world away from her. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before we all broke into applause. Sarah had tears in her eyes. I just looked at my daughter, my heart swelling with a love so fierce and proud it almost hurt. She had taken her pain and used it as fuel, not to burn the world down, but to light her own way forward. As I looked around the room, at Sarah chatting with my friends, at Chloe laughing, at the warm, gentle light bathing all of us, my mind drifted back to that other house, that other Christmas. I thought of the cavernous rooms, the expensive furniture, and the cold, hollow feeling that had always permeated the air. I remembered the feeling of being an outsider in a place that was supposed to be my home. A single powerful thought bloomed in my mind with absolute clarity. They'd said there was no room at their table. So I built my own. It was that simple. I had spent years begging for a space at a table where I was never truly wanted. I had paid for the chairs, the food, the roof overhead, all in the desperate hope that my value would one day be recognized. But my value was never in question. The failure was in their vision, in their inability to see it. Their world was built on exclusion, on being maxed out, on deciding who was and was not worthy of a seat. My world, the one I had built in this small, glowing house, had different rules. My table was small, but its edges were soft and expandable. It could always make room. Looking at the smiling faces of the people I loved, I realized what a true home felt like. It wasn't a structure of wood and plaster. It was a fortress built of trust and acceptance. It was a place where you didn't have to apologize for existing, where you were loved not for your utility, but for your soul. I smiled, a real deep smile that reached my eyes. The ghosts of the past were finally gone. They hadn't been defeated in a blaze of vengeful glory. They had simply faded away, starved of the attention and energy they required to survive. In their place was this, a quiet, unshakable peace. And at this table there was always room for love.